What if every unexpected move in your life, every relocation, transition, or disruption was actually a divine invitation to trust God more deeply? Today, we're joined by someone who knows that journey all too well. After 14 moves, Jesus, I don't think in my whole life I've moved that much. 4 deployments and countless goodbyes, she found peace, not in stability, but in surrender. I'm Natty.
I'm Vita.
And we are here to thrive.
Welcome back to Thrive by the Rising Muse. We're so glad you're here for another conversation about faith, resilience, and the power of choosing growth in the middle of life's changes. Our guest today is Beth Runkle, and she's an author, a speaker, a women's ministry leader whose new devotional, Another Move God, I like that, encourages military wives to embrace the life God's called them to, even when that means constant change. After 25 years as a military wife, 14 moves, raising 2 children through 4 deployments. Wow. Beth learned that peace isn't about control, it's about trust, truth. So, she and her husband now serve with Crew Military, mentoring young military couples and cadets. In this conversation, we'll talk about faith, marriage, loneliness, and how to go from just serving to thriving. Welcome back to the show, Beth.
Thanks. It's so great to be with you guys. I feel like I just got to get together with 2 old friends.
Yes, and
That's
you have.
how we feel. Exactly.
Well, you started your military wife very young, and you said that your journey was bitter, reluctant, and selfish. You can't get more honest than that.
That was exactly
because she's a military wife too.
That was me.
I remember that.
I think a lot of people can relate, even outside marriage. What was the turning point when your faith began to shift that perspective?
Yeah, so I had met my husband at a wedding. We dated long distance. I had never actually seen him in his uniform, and he had talked a lot about it. And I consider that God's grace, because I don't think I would have married him if I would have known what I was signing up for. I didn't know anything about the military. So we got married and we moved 3 times our first year of marriage. And then we showed up to Langley Air Force Base, which was his first operational base flying, and then he deployed. And I really found myself thinking, like, what in the world have I gotten myself into? You know, I've moved. I had made significant career sacrifices. It's pretty hard to keep a career when you're moving 3 times in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in addition to the deployments, the moving, it just seemed like our vacations were getting canceled. He was going to go on deployment. No, he wasn't. Now he was going to go later. Oh, he wasn't going to come home on time. And unfortunately, I was just really upset about all of the inconveniences it had added to my life. I wasn't embracing it. I honestly said to him at one point, you know, what about me? What about my career? Like, what about what I want to do? And he just kind of looked at me and said, like, I don't know what you want me to do. I'm in the military and I have a commitment. And I think at that point, I saw him as a competitor, and I saw, like, you have a job, I have a job. But what I didn't understand was that when a man or woman serves in uniform, I believe that they have a calling to serve in uniform. And it's not the same as a clergy calling, but it's similar in that I believe it's something that is a special duty or obligation that one feels is their duty to perform. And so when I began to understand that, I was coming to faith in the Lord, coming to understand a relationship with Jesus, coming to understand that I was a sinner that needed to be saved, and that by placing my faith in him, I could receive his forgiveness and accept his death as the penalty for my sin that he paid on my behalf. And then I began to, one of the character attributes of God that I've always been drawn to is just his sovereignty, to understand that he is in control of all things. And I really clung to that because, let's be honest, I wasn't in control of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then to see that if God had caused me to marry this man who was in the military, who at that time had a, 10 more year commitment, that in God's sovereignty, it wasn't a mistake that I had married him, even though I didn't understand what I was getting into. And then really see that God actually had a calling on my life too. And no, I didn't wear the uniform. I didn't pick up the weapons. I didn't go off to war, but I could be used for kingdom purposes in the military community and in our midst that we were going to come into contact with. And I believe that God had a lot of people he wanted us to be in contact with, because we moved every 14 moves. And so instead of feeling sorry for myself and bitter, the Lord just began to allow me to trust him and to realize that it wasn't a mistake. But I also began to see that my bitterness, and, honestly, my husband wasn't home very much. And when he was, I was moaning about how much I hated the military. And this is something, that has been a lifelong dream for him.
Mm-hmm.
He's going off, he's risking his life.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am like, well, I don't like the military. And so our marriage was getting very difficult. I wasn't a lot of fun to be around in those limited times. So God just really began to change my perspective and not feel so sorry for myself, to see that now I was in a unique opportunity to serve others and to make an impact for the kingdom. And it didn't happen overnight, but I went from really hating those first few assignments to loving it and loving the people. Really feeling like when God moved us that I had work to do in that next location, just like my husband. It was just a little different, and no, I didn't get compensated for it.
Mm-hmm.
So our marriage went from really, really hard to, we both had become believers, and then we, began to see ourselves as on mission together, as a married couple to reach the military for Christ. And so instead of reluctance and I hate it and I'm bitter, to these are the people that God has called me to. And, instead of just those first few assignments, I kind of was sitting around waiting for people to come to me and complaining.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we showed up at our next assignment after when my husband had deployed 4 times. And I told my husband how unfortunate it was that this squadron didn't have the same community feel as the previous one. And I sure did wish that someone would welcome people, because no one was doing that. And I just felt like people weren't being embraced. And he just really rather kindly said, well, you could do something about that. And I really took that as a you know what? I could.
Yeah.
I can be friendly. I can, I'll be honest, I would bake people cookies, but bake means I slice and baked the cookies,
Gotcha.
and it was just
they
simple.
were in the oven.
I like your
Yeah,
way.
they were in the oven, and I showed up and I gave them a little 2-page flyer on where to go get your hair done, where to go to a restaurant, where could you have vet care, where's there a boarding for your pet, things like that. And then I just welcomed them and said, hey, welcome. And then what I began to do is I was making friends as I was welcoming people. And then I found myself in the connector role of connecting other people. So it really killed 2 birds with 1 stone. I felt purpose in my life, connected to my husband, but I was cultivating community. I was having, making all these connections for people. So I wasn't as lonely anymore, which was a tremendous blessing. The previous few moves, it was really taking me, we were only in some of our locations a few months. So I was spending the whole time lonely and miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we moved to this small town and, I started welcoming people, I really greatly reduced that loneliness factor, the amount of time, because I was getting out there, because I saw myself as kind of having this job to bless people and influence them. But, really, I got the greater blessing by
Mm-hmm.
going out there. And then I just wasn't so self-consumed anymore with the pity party. And I was worried about other people. But really that shift came from just getting out of that pity party and saying, how can I be about making a positive change in this community?
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
While you were talking, it took me back.
I bet.
We got married. 3 weeks later, he went to boot camp. He
And you
came
maybe
back.
got a once a week call for 10 minutes. Maybe.
He came back, and I had just had Jillian. And then he got his duty station, which was in Okinawa, Japan.
Welcome to the adventure.
And I was in Birmingham, Alabama with a brand new baby.
Right.
So he was gone for a year. Our first anniversary, I was miserable.
I bet you were.
The first Christmas, I was miserable.
Mhm.
And then when he came back home after a year, his next duty station was 29 Palms, California.
I know 29 Palms.
In the middle of the Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
Jesus.
The scenery is dirt.
It's dirt, tumbleweed, cactus, cacti, more than one. And it was 29 Palms. It was called the Marine Base, 29 Palms, California. There was not 29 palm trees there.
No.
We were there for 2 years and I counted.
I don't think there were probably 29 pieces of grass.
Lots of rocks, lots of sand.
Yeah.
There were not even pictures of palms.
I was miserable. Didn't want to go that far away from home anyway. Up until the night we had to leave and they were coming in to pack up our house, and I cried, I begged. I said, I will do anything if I didn't have to go.
Yeah.
Well, I had to go.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to go, Beth.
Mm-hmm.
You know why I needed to go? Because I needed to separate myself from my mom and my grandmother.
Yeah, you had to leave and cleave. That's one of the things that I feel like military life forces is the leaving and cleaving, because we never lived really. We had 1 year that we lived 3 hours away from family, but every other time it was oceans away or, the distance of the
Around the
continental
world.
U.S.
Yeah.
And I do feel like scripture tells us, leave your mother and father and cleave to your spouse. And I think I work with a lot of young adults now, and that is really hard for couples to do. But I do feel like a blessing of the military life is you kind of get forced to leave and cleave, because you move and you kind of look at each other and you're like, well, you're all I got. I guess we better figure this out. Now, some couples don't do that, and they honestly see each other as the enemy when they are really the only ally that they have.
That's true.
It's just about perspective. But
That's
I felt
true.
like so often we were moving all our household goods, finding, a new house, new gym, new activities for the kids, new church, that we kind of had to say, hey, we're going to be on the same team because this is hard. And I felt like we had to adult more quickly than maybe our civilian counterparts because of all the moving. But yeah, it's hard. I will say I would miss active duty military life. I actually miss the change and all the new people. And I came to love it so much, but it was hard, but it was good because it was very sanctifying. I felt like God did so much work on my character because of all the hardships, because of all the times my husband left, because of all the moves, because of all the transition. I really feel like it was a quick incubator for sanctification because you're just facing so much hard. And I'm thankful for it, but I wasn't always in the moment,
I understand. My husband made one big mistake. After taking the oath and everything, and he came back and he said, you know what they told me? I said, what? If we thought you needed a wife, we would have issued.
Oh, yeah. That's a great phrase. So kind.
From that phrase on, I'm like, I hate the military. And that's how I went to California, kicking and screaming. But as you know, Beth, in those 2 years of being in the Mojave Desert, getting pregnant and being pregnant when it was 110 in the shade, and the closest McDonald's was 25 miles away.
Woo!
And while I was pregnant with my second child out there, I was craving McDonald's.
Of course. Yeah.
And my husband looked at me like, you really want me to drive 25 miles? You ain't back yet?
You're like, yeah, I've got a craving. Well, we were stationed in Alamogordo, New Mexico when I was pregnant with my daughter. And Alamogordo, New Mexico might be about the same size as 29 Palms. Very similar geographic. We did have a McDonald's. but I craved frozen yogurt and we didn't have
Mm.
any. So I would drive an hour to get some frozen yogurt. Because, when you got a craving, you got a craving.
When you got it, you got it. Yeah.
But I mean, it really wasn't all that bad to have to drive an hour. But I did it a few times.
Even though I went there kicking and screaming, I came back mature.
Well, I always say I cried going into each location because we did a lot of what I like to call armpit of the Americas assignments.
Mm.
There are places with very good airspace, but not a whole lot below it.
Mm.
And I always say I would cry going, but I would cry harder leaving because of all the great people and, because of all the impact that we'd had and, what opportunities the Lord had allowed us to be a part of, really investing in people because there wasn't a lot of Bible studies. There wasn't a lot of small groups for people. So we just created them. But yeah, I always cried much harder leaving.
Met wonderful people, made friendships. We kept in touch for years, and that was truly awesome. Beth, you talk about relinquish
Yes.
control, okay? Not just in theory, but in everyday moments. What did that look like when your deployments were extended or when you didn't know where you're going to be living next? How did that look when
Yeah,
you
that's
gave up
definitely
control?
one of the hard parts about military life is that you don't have control.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have control over when you're moving, where you're moving, when they're deploying, when they're coming home, when they're going on TDY. Even my husband would often evacuate with hurricanes because, they had to protect the airplanes. They
Mm-hmm.
don't really care about the wife, family, and pets left at home. Um, yeah, so uncertainty is really the only thing that you can count on. But I really came to cling to the sovereignty of God. There were so many times that something would come down from the powers that be that wasn't our plan, either timing or place or, just all the circumstances. And I coined this phrase that I would say aloud. My husband would come and he would usually tell me, so I need you to sit down. And that was my cue that what's about to come out of your mouth is not good.
Mm-hmm.
But, he would say, hey, we got orders to such and such, or hey, my deployment's changed, or hey, I'm not coming home when they said I was, all the above. And he would tell me whatever it was. But then, I would say, God outranks the generals.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just a thing for me. It was how I claimed that I
Mm-hmm.
knew that God was still in control.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it's the only thing that got me through because so much happens that is outside of your control
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
that I just had to say that, and I had when we often got orders out of cycle early.
Mm.
You were anticipating you were going to get to stay there and here we go, we're going early. And so I really learned to start saying, well, God's got work for us to do in that place. And it might not be where we wanted to go and it might not be our plan, but it's what God has for us. I think the biggest challenge, because so many of the big things in my life were out of my control, I began to struggle with trying to micromanage the little things,
Mm-hmm.
just the stupid things, and when you have children, that doesn't work real well. So I had to learn how to surrender those things too. I feel like the bigger things, where we were going to move and the timing of things, I knew those were out of my control. So there began to be daily surrenders too of the little things, and to realize that I was trying to grip control to anything I could because so much was out of my control. And then, just daily surrenders like, okay, Lord, I know I'm trying to control our schedule today, or I'm trying to control, what sports or what schools or, all the different things, just daily surrenders. But I think it was not easy. I
Mm-hmm.
think me before Jesus, I just want to be in control of everything. And I think God has a sense of humor because he's like, okay, so I see the way you are. And so I'm going to just continually put you in situations where you can't control anything and you can't
Mm-hmm.
hold on to anything, that you literally can only hold on to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard, but I just kind of kept, I really believe in the power of self-talk, replacing the lies that the enemy feeds me with the truth of what I know to be true from God's word. And so I would just, do that. often allowed.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
Right.
okay, this isn't happening, or wow, you're trying to take control of this, or, you know, God can be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of my most frequent phrases that I would say when XYZ would happen that wasn't according to my plan, I would just say, well, God's sovereign. And it wasn't like I was sugarcoating it. I was just speaking to myself.
Mhm. So you mentioned that you came to know Christ during a Bible study of Genesis,
Yes.
and your book talks about heavily about the Sarah story, which is something I love personally. What about her journey made you feel seen and understood as a military wife that was constantly in the mood?
Yeah, well, I love that question because it is so much a part of my testimony and how I came to Christ. So we had moved, now we're talking the fourth time in 3 years, and I had spent a lot of the previous assignment lonely. And so I was seeking at that time, but I did not yet understand God's plan of salvation. I had not yet read the Bible. I was seeking, but I decided that this next time when we moved, that I was going to leave my pattern of loneliness behind, and I was going to do what I could to get out there, to make friends, and to greatly reduce the period of time of loneliness. That previous assignment, I basically had spent an entire year, very lonely. So we showed up at this next assignment. My husband ran into some people that he used to go to college with, and the wife invited me to join the Bible study. And I had never done a Bible study before. The only Bible I had still had many pages that had never been turned. It was a Precious Moments Bible with little gold edges, and it was
Mm-hmm.
pink.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I began that Bible study, and it was on Genesis, and it was on Sarah and Abraham. And first of all, I understood God's plan of salvation, that I was a sinner, that I needed to be saved. I think prior to that, my worldview had been that, like, if I'm a pretty good person, I'm not an axe murderer, like, I'll go to heaven. And I don't think that's what scripture says now, but I didn't
Right. But
understand
a
that.
lot of people think that.
Yes, it's definitely a huge misconception, but it is a
Mm-hmm.
misconception. So we began in Sarah's story at the very beginning. And through that study, I understood why Jesus had to come. But I also saw right away, I saw parallels to my life and Sarah's life. And it really caused me to want to get to know this God better, because I was like, wow, I felt very seen by God, that the very first time I ever read the Bible for myself, I start in Sarah's life. And, when God tells Sarah and Abraham, go to a land that I will show you, that is a PCS, permanent change of station. God was
Mm-hmm.
saying, you're living here, but you're going
Mm-hmm.
to move here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, what we do all the time. And it was really rare in ancient history at that time for people to leave their family and go to a new place. And then Sarah and Abraham were constantly on the move. God's like, hey, you're from Ur, you're going to go to Haran, you're going to go to Canaan, you're going to go to Bethel, you're going to go to Oaks of the Marm, then to Egypt, back to Bethel. I mean, they're just constantly on the move. And I'm like, wow, her life is like mine. In fact, I think she might have moved a little bit more at that point. And then I'm like, and she's doing it on the backs of camels and donkey. Like, I at least have movers
I'm in a
coming and
car.
getting my household goods, or U-Haul. And then, Abraham is a leader for his country, but also for God. And a lot of people don't think of Abraham as a warrior, but Abraham goes off to rescue his nephew Lot from the four kings and their armies. And that's a combat deployment. And
Mm-hmm.
I imagine Sarah sitting home in her home tent.
Mm-hmm.
She's not getting her once a week phone call or her Skype calls.
Right.
And it was very brutal hand to hand combat back at that time in ancient history. So I just saw all these parallels and, began to really press in and say, understand for the first time, these are real stories and real people. And how can I model Sarah's life where she really pressed into God and had that faith that she needed to do that life? And so I never had any idea at that time that I would one day write a book. But I've always been so endeared to Sarah because I came to faith in Christ in those pages of Genesis. But then I just saw all these parallels. And then, God just opened some doors for me to share these parallels. And that's really what the book is. I take you through from Genesis 12 through 22, really teaching what are the lessons from scripture and God's word. But I paint the parallels at the beginning of each chapter between Sarah and Abraham's life and that of a military family.
That's awesome. That is awesome. One thing that you that really stood out in your devotional is how you encourage wives to prioritize their marriages, even when it feels like you're in survival mode. What's one practical thing that you tell couples to strengthen their bond in those seasons?
Yeah, marriage is always great, but hard too. I do a lot of premarital mentoring now, and it seems like a lot of the parents have told the couples that marriage is super, super hard and prepare yourself. It is, but it's also good. I don't want to deny that. Especially when you're in a Christ-centered marriage, it can be very good. But yeah, military marriage might be a little bit harder, right? We have deployments. We're always moving. You're away from family. You don't have family there to help out with childcare. And I think that we learned early on, because we went to a Christian marriage conference, that we needed to invest in our marriage, prioritize our marriage. For us, that involved leading small group marriage studies. They were really simple concepts, just telling other people how to have a Christ-centered marriage, but at the same point, making deposits into our own marriage. Because let's be honest, it is hard to be Christ-like in your marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is hard to be selfless. Husbands are called to love their wives sacrificially as Christ loves the church. That's hard. Wives are called to respect our husbands. That's hard. So I think we have to renew our minds with scripture and remind ourselves. But we also, we're willing to invest in our marriage with time. We were really diligent about prioritizing our marriage and taking date nights. That didn't always mean that we went out and spent money and got a babysitter. Let's just be honest, we were a single family home a lot of the time, so we couldn't afford that. But, we would just set aside, okay, we're putting the kids to bed on time and we're going to spend time together. And then also one of our, what we like to call secret sauce to being happily married for 28 years and counting, is we've always done at least 24 hours away together every year of marriage, to just reinvest in our marriage. Remember why we got married in the first place, and really focus on one another. Even when we had babies, even when we were moving, we would just find another military family and say, hey, we'll watch your kids one weekend. Will you watch our kids the other? And just make it happen. Fortunately, we also had parents that, at various times, depending upon where we lived, were willing to come and watch the kids. And we just set aside the money, because if we were flying them out to watch the kids, that means we were paying for their ticket too. But yeah, just asking other families, but prioritizing and saying, yes, you're away on deployment, or you've been doing some TDYs. That's a business trip for those of you that don't speak military. You've been gone and you might not want to spend time away from the kids, but we always told the kids, hey, priorities is, first of all of us, first is God, second is our marriage, and then comes the kids and work. And so, we're like, yes, we're doing a date or we're going away for the weekend. And they might say, well, why? I don't want you to leave. And because mommy and daddy love each other most, and we have to build our foundation to be good parents to you. So I would just encourage people to prioritize that. I mean, one time I remember we used to do themes sometimes for our date nights where we stayed in. I can remember we had a picnic. We laid out a picnic blanket. We had sandwiches. We sat in the living room. We had another time we pretended we went to the beach. We laid out some beach towels, and we even put up an umbrella. I mean, it's silly, but I remember those dates. I remember those. And the kids were already in bed. I mean, you just focus on conversation, and it's real easy, to just stream something or be on your phone and not really be together. But we were intentional to say, hey, we're going to communicate with one another because we know that's going to help improve our marriage.
Through the deployments, how did you keep that connection with that 10-minute once a week call if you were
That was in the
yeah.
beginning. It's not that way now. It's gotten a lot better.
Okay.
In the beginning, my husband could call me more than once a week for 10 minutes. He had to go through the central operator, and they would cut you off at 10 minutes. So the first couple of times he would call, we only got to talk once a week because I worked for a company where I worked with different clients. And so he never knew where I was going to be. back then you didn't have a cell phone you carried with you. You just left it in the car. So we really only did talk on Saturday mornings, and they would cut you off. So we learned a couple of times that maybe we would talk about the problems. Like we had a massive mold problem one of our times, and I'd be like, so I got to tell you, mold's taking over the house. And then we would realize like we never remind each other we love each other. So we learned you got to start the phone call with like, hey, I love you, I'm there for you. But there's lots of great ways. I would say lots of streams of communication. So I mean, nowadays, I mean, back then we wrote letters, we emailed, we talked on the phone. Eventually, you know, we started to be able to do video calls. You can text message. Marco Polo, I think, is a really great means. I don't know if you know what Marco Polo is. Marco Polo is a game that we played in the pool as children, but it's also
I know that.
Yeah, it's also an app where you can leave video. You can kind of like text back and forth videos, but it's not, you're not sending all the data. It goes through the app. So it's a great way. You can just send them a video. You can actually go for quite a while. You know, you're talking video, it goes to them through the app, and then they can video you back. So you can have the kids Marco Polo back to dad, and they respond. And it's just a way to keep the communication going. But I would say you communicate every way you can. And you have to prioritize it. And we realize that once you have the capability, now we have connectivity, right? I mean, my husband could be in the Middle East and I could pick up the phone and call him. And, you know, maybe he's like in the middle of something really intense. So we learned that's not a good time for me to call.
Right.
Because like he's in war mode. Conversely, sometimes he can call me and I'm in my home war mode. You know, like the kids are fighting and it's just not a good moment. Right. And so both ways we cannot be ready to connect. So, you know, for example, if my husband calls and my kids are fighting, I might not be very nice. Right. I might be like, why are you not here? And you make my life so hard. Right. So we really found that we're going to connect live. We're going to schedule it. And then we do it as much as we can. And there are things that come up. I mean, when you're on deployment, life happens. Or for me, life happens. But we tried to make it happen as much as we could. And that we knew, like, okay, it didn't happen tonight. So we're going to use our Marco Polo, or we're going to send each other text messages or whatever. We're going to make it. But we do it as much as we can. So we've built that trust and we have that connectivity. But we just found it doesn't work well to just pick each other up and call because of those both somewhat stressful environments where you can't know what to expect. Some people do really well that way. I mean, and then both of us knew that we needed accountability partners because we wanted to be faithful. And it's hard to do when they're gone for 6 months. It's hard on both sides of the ocean. Yeah. So also, you know, so we both had an accountability partner, somebody who's going to be checking in with us. And then, you know, we had some guardrails, you know, to make sure that we weren't entering into an emotional relationship with someone of the opposite gender during deployment. Because most affairs do start with an emotional affair. So these are just things we talked about before deployment, and then, you know, made sure that both of us, for us, it was always on both sides of the ocean. You know, we had somebody who's going to hold us accountable and just remind us of those things. I think also porn use on deployment on both sides of the ocean is a real problem. And we really came to realize that erodes your intimacy in your marriage. So that is also a boundary that we didn't allow, and we encourage others to set that boundary. Some people think it's necessary to survive, but I think statistically, like when you look at what happens to your brain and look at what it does to your relationships and even your physical response, I believe that when you use porn on deployment, you are stealing from your future relationship.
I like the way you put that.
Yeah. And I think that's very mature to discuss as a couple, because some people might not, even by the fact that they're married, they might not feel comfortable of talking about such poignant topics. But that is very, very important to maintain a good, healthy marriage, and very mature to make sure that the marriage is successful and within the boundaries of Christ. So that I applaud that. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. You experienced 4 deployments, those long stretches.
14, she said.
No, 14 moves, 4 deployments.
I gotcha. Okay.
4 deployments, those long stretches of solo parenting, and holding everything together. How did your faith sustain you in those lonely seasons? I know you just talked about having an accountability partner.
Yeah, I think something that's really important, especially when you have children, is recognizing that more is less when your spouse is deployed, and then also recognizing the importance of self care. And I don't mean self care in an indulgent, go to the
Mm-hmm.
spa kind of way. I mean, keeping yourself healthy. So, first of all, talking about more is less. I think on deployment at first, you just think like, oh, dad's not here, so we're going to make it super fun. I'm going to do all these extra things. And what ends up happening is you're super stressed out and you've added to your schedule and you're not a nice mom to be around. And then when you do talk to your spouse that's deployed, you're bitter. So I really learned that we needed to take a very hard look at our schedule. And when my husband was deployed, we needed to, I'm going to use a pilot term, throttle back on what we were doing because my stress is already going to be higher and my spouse cannot step in to help me. So I needed to do what I could do to manage it and make it less. So, I looked at all of our activities and I would say, hey, is this ministering to me? Is this ministering to others? Is this both? I evaluated all of those and I said, I have got to cut some things to keep my stress level low. Another thing I did to keep my stress level low is like, hey, when we could eat mac and cheese or chicken nuggets for dinner, like we did, that might not be healthy. I didn't do that all the time, but some days you just got to celebrate that you don't have to cook. And the kids are happier. They're
Yeah.
actually happier when you bring out the blue box with the mac and
Right.
cheese. They think it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, but I didn't do that every night because if I eat mac and cheese for months on end, that's just going to add to my bitterness, right?
Hmm.
Right.
And then so when your spouse is deployed, your income is not federally taxed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we began to say, a lot of people will go into deployment and say, hey, we're going to like pay down debt or we're going to save all this money because we're not being taxed. But we began to realize if we just focused on the financial benefit and we're not willing to use some of that money to outsource some of the things, because I can't do it all and maintain patience and be Christ-like if I'm trying to do it all, right? So in the beginning, I mean, I was doing the lawn care and keeping the house clean and keeping the cars running and the kids and everything. And you know what ends up happening is like, I'm not nice to be around. So we realized like, I've got to outsource some things, So for us, it was lawn care and maybe some help with housekeeping, because I'm doing everything else. I'm running everybody to all their sports. I'm at all the games. So trying to say, what things can I outsource? A lot of families will do grocery delivery during that time, online shopping. But, figure out what can we do to make my load a little bit easier and also to make me not blame my
Mm-hmm.
military member that I have everything. And I
Hmm.
think too, the self-care, I want to talk about that. So Bible study and being involved with other women is super important for my self care. Even now in full time ministry, I have to be involved in a Bible study that's for my spiritual health, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be saying to the Lord, what do you want to say to me? And that's really important. But also, when my husband was deployed, we would get a babysitter for me to just get a break.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody might say, oh, you could have saved that money. No, it was quality of life for
Mm-hmm.
me
Saving
and
my sanity.
recognizing I needed a break
Right.
and then doing things that are going to fill my spiritual tank. I needed a prayer partner during those
Mm-hmm.
times, somebody that's I'm going to meet to pray with, who's going to be like that soul sister with me. And prioritizing making that happen, even if it meant childcare to make that happen, time in prayer. But I also think not just putting all the burden on me for all the things and being willing to say to people, hey, like we could use some help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard for a military spouse. We like to be super independent and like have all our ducks in a row and do all the things because we are used to. But I think it really allows people to minister to you when you're willing to say, like, hey, we could use some help.
Mm-hmm.
Military spouses are really good about helping each other, but sometimes it's okay to say to a neighbor or really, especially people at your church, hey, I could use some help. One of the big things that I would ask for sometimes was just like, hey, can I have a hug?
Hmm.
that might seem super minor, but I mean, you're having people touch you, but let's be honest, they're like grabbing on your leg, and it's not loving touch,
Right.
and you just miss touch. And so I would say, like, to your audience, if you guys know people, military spouses, military members, you go to your church in your neighborhood, you'd be surprised how much just going up to them and saying, "Hey, could I like give you a hug?" I mean, I would weep because I just needed touch from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe ask them, "Hey, can I watch your kids for a couple hours so you could get a break?" She is going to praise the Lord that you're going to watch her kids for a few hours. She needs a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but I mean, I needed things that were going to be life giving to me and that were going to remind me that God could be trusted. And I needed to be in his word, because the enemy will feed us fears and lies, especially when our service member is deployed. And I needed to remind myself, nope, that is not true. What is true is God is sovereign. God can be trusted. Perfect love casts out all fear. Right? Just remind myself of those truths and not give in to the lies and not feed the anxiety.
Usually, culture tells us that contentment comes after things are settled down. But you talk about choosing contentment right where you are. How can military wives or military spouses, really anyone living through uncertainty, practice that kind of peace every day?
Yeah, well, I think if I waited for things to be settled, I would be waiting forever. And thankfully, the Lord taught me that he could use exactly where I was. And, to see that I really believe all the places we were stationed, all the different houses we lived in, the different neighbors we had, those were not a mistake. They were assignments that the Lord had for me. And yeah, just to see that the Lord is at work everywhere we are. I think so many of us don't enjoy the moment because we're waiting for the next thing. Right. So I had infertility, and that's part of why Sarah's story appealed to me so much. That's a big part of Sarah's life. So I just feel like throughout life, if we are always looking to the next thing, we are missing the joy in the season that we're at. Right. So for so long, I wanted children. And the Lord really said for a while, I just want you to enjoy me. I'm not giving you children because you have so much to learn about me. And ultimately, he led us to adoption. And I think that was an absolutely beautiful plan that the Lord had for me. But, all the moves, all the different challenges, those were assignments that God had for me. Maybe I didn't want them, but he did, and I feel like once I had little kids, it was especially when you have, like, I had 2 little kids. We went from having no children to 2 in a little under a year because we adopted, and then we were blessed with a miracle conception. And so if I was always focused on, like, hey, if these kids should just get out of diapers, or if somebody could be potty trained, or we're going to miss the joy in the season right where we're at. And so I think we just have to say, this is the season that the Lord has me in, and I want to be teachable and learn the lessons that he has and just enjoy where I'm at. And because we were moving so frequently, if I started focus on, like, so we might get orders and be moving in a few months. And I had to be really intentional to say, we're not there yet. And I need to fully engage where I am right now. Because right now, these are the people, these are the friends for my kids. They're right now. And we can't switch gears yet. I mean, I think, we are always so tempted to think the grass is greener on the other side. But you know what? When we get there, we usually say, I kind of liked that grass better. So I just think we have to choose joy where we're at, and then ask, Lord, even if it's hard, even if it looks like the grass is dead, ask the Lord, what do you want to teach me in this season? How can I be sanctified and look more like Christ in this season, even though it's hard? And I'm an empty nester now. And so many of my friends have such a hard time with it. And I really haven't. And I think it's because we are in full ministry. I have lots of other people I'm pouring into. But, the Lord has my kids, and he is growing them, and he is stretching them, and he's writing their story right now. And I have to trust him with that. But then I have to say, hey, I'm going to be content with where I am and where the Lord has me. So I just think we have to just be thankful for where we are and get the lesson for where we are right now, and not always think that it's going to be better at the next step.
Beth, is your husband retired now?
Yes, we both are in full-time ministry now to the
Okay.
military. My husband said at 25 years that he was done serving in uniform, but we were not ready to leave ministry to the military behind. So we joined a ministry where we could continue to serve the military. I'd be super surprised if you get us away from them because they are our people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the Lord has absolutely called us to reach them with the gospel and just to invest in them. So we're still doing it, just not from wearing the uniform. Although my husband, usually about once a year, he'll have cadets ask him to commission them, so to swear their oath in with them, and he gets to put on his uniform. And I think that's actually pretty exciting for him. And he still looks good in it.
Yay. I don't think my husband can put his wrist in his uniform.
I agree with you.
In his dress blues, no ma'am. No ma'am. We have to put him up on the wall in a frame and the way we were.
Yeah.
Yes. Beth, your book challenges women to go from just surviving to thriving, which I love. What's the biggest mindset shift that takes someone from barely hanging on to walking confidently in God's purpose?
Well, I kind of already said one thing, but I'm going to add to it. So the one thing is just seeing yourself as also called to, serve those in your midst.
Mm-hmm.
That your spouse has a calling to serve in uniform, but you too, if you're married to them, you too have a calling and you're not there by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think my other greatest tip I love to impart to people is just to cultivate the community that you need and be the connector for other people. So, really, I learned how to show up. I call it boots on the ground. We might still have boxes to unpack. We might not be settled at all, but I would find one other woman and say, hey, you want to start doing Bible study together? You can come to my house one night a week. It's not pretty, but you can come and and the group would always grow. And then my husband and I did the same thing with small groups for marriage studies. We would just invite another couple or two. And so what we found is that we were just creating community. We weren't having those periods of loneliness because we were showing up and we weren't looking to other people to come invite us to things. We were just creating them. And then I really began to love this role of connector, always trying to help people connect with other people. And I think, especially in today's world, phones are a great tool. They're a great tool. I use mine all the time. But I think they can sometimes take us away from face-to-face communication.
Yes.
And we desperately need it. We were created for relationship, first of all with God, but then with other people. And we need face-to-face communication. Loneliness is an absolute epidemic. A couple years ago, Surgeon General came out with, hey, loneliness is an epidemic, and it's not just detrimental to your mental health, it is detrimental to your physical health. And the way they said that is detrimental to your physical health, they said it is as detrimental as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
And I think that we think that loneliness is not that big deal and we'll just be okay. But this shows us that it affects our physical health and we need other people. And I don't believe that the phone fills our need for other people.
Right.
And it is harder and harder, especially after COVID, right? We were isolated for so long. And I think some of the younger military spouses were isolated for so long and they have a great community online. And I'm not at all saying that online community is not important, but it is not all you need. You need real live flesh and blood people to be in relationship with. And so, I would just encourage people, you got to get out of your house. And I know it's uncomfortable. And I've heard young military spouses tell me, well, there's nobody like me. There's just nobody I connect with. And I'm here to tell you, there are almost 1 million military spouses right now. 1 million. So don't tell me that there isn't somebody out there like you in 1 million military spouses. We come in all shapes and colors, all personality types, all likes, all dislikes. And honestly, some of my best friends from the military life, I don't think I would have been friends with had the military journey not put us together. They're very different from me, but I really learned to just get along with all kinds of people. And so you got to do that and you got to cultivate that community. You got to get outside. If you're invited to something, go. But don't just go by yourself. invite somebody else to go with you so you don't feel so awkward. And you know what? They're going to be blessed. And maybe even if you don't meet somebody at this event, you've made that connection with that person you took
Right.
with you.
Right.
And you've made a friendship. And you got to make the first move to be like, hey, so I'm new here. Would you want to grab coffee? I've done it. I've done it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how friendships are forged. But we don't just go to coffee and pretend that we have it all together. Because let's be honest, none of us have it all together.
Right.
I would go to coffee, somebody brand new, and be like, hey, we're really struggling with XYZ. What about you? And then all of a sudden, all that plastic facade that we pretend that we have it all together comes down, and the other person's like, wow, we're really struggling too.
Mm-hmm.
And then now you have a friend. But we have to be vulnerable to admit that we don't have it all together.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you're working with younger couples now in the military. And, some things are different because, like we were talking in terms of connections, now technology may allow some things that 20 years ago you couldn't do.
Absolutely. Yes.
What are the new challenges that you're finding that this new generation of military spouses are having right now?
Well, I think it's that they do have so much connectivity over their phone, but it doesn't meet their needs. So they got to get off their phone. I think it's a tool we can use. So our last assignment, I found who ended up being my best friend through a social media group. I put out there, hey, does anybody have teens? We're fixing to move there and I'm looking for somebody with teens. And she was like, yes, I do. We met up for coffee and then, we were running partners. We ran at least once a week together. Our kids were friends. And I would have never met her because our husbands didn't, work together. I would have never met her if we hadn't made this connection. So it's a great tool, but we have to still get face to face. We have to still invite people over. And one of the things I talk about in the book is that we have such an improper view of hospitality when we think our house needs to be perfect to invite people over. Hospitality is kind of a lost art right now. But I think we have to be willing to invite people into our homes because we really want to invite them into our heart. And I think hospitality is not about perfection. It's about connection. And I really think it's okay to invite people into your imperfect house. And I think that's a way we can make great connections. So I think for, the younger military spouse, they're just kind of living behind their screen and they're terribly lonely. Obviously, the screen gives better connectivity to your spouse, but I do think when they're deployed or TDY, but I do think we have to navigate some of these like, hey, you're at war and I can't just call you at the drop of a hat. And, realizing we got the screens, we got everything on the screens. Those are new temptations, new things that we have to talk about. And we have to be intentional to kind of be uncomfortable to make some real life friends, but we need it. And I feel like a lot of younger spouses think they don't need it because they have friends from previous assignments all across the country and they're just connected with them on social media or text or whatever. But no, you need some flesh and blood friends.
I think that's a generational thing. It's not just the military because we have teenagers and
we do.
They live in front of their phones. And you tell them, but you don't have friends. Yeah, I have plenty of friends. I'm talking to them. I'm playing video games with them and shouting and whatnot. But they don't have somebody who they see face to face, and the interaction is not the same.
Yeah, and that's why I think loneliness is such an epidemic.
Yeah,
because everybody. I mean, I use my phone too, but I still think we need to be with real life people, and most of the time that means we have to take the initiative. We have to be the person to make the first move.
Sometimes military families endure serious financial distress either because the other spouse doesn't work or their income is not enough. Or the men in military life changes. You move so much, what we have to deal with, and then the children adjusted. What would you say to families experiencing struggles like that today?
Well, I think certainly the last month, this has been a real problem for our men and women in uniform and their families, right?
Exactly.
Some of the banks were able to afford the pay. I think they did get paid late. But often when one person serves in the military, the other person is not able to have a job because of all the deployments, because of the TDYs, because of the long, inconsistent hours. So it really is a sacrifice with time, but also financially. And many military families are a single family income. So it is a big deal. And it has been a big deal this last month with the government shutdown. And I think we have to plan for that. Another financial burden that military families have is you will be reimbursed for the cost to move your things, but it takes several months to get through the system. And so you're fronting that money. So financially, I think it's always a really good idea to have an emergency fund, which is a minimum of 3 months of pay. That you always have set aside that you can use. Now, I know that's really hard to do, but I think it's essential to make sure that you're not going to have bumps. Because, I mean, in the last number of years, we've had a lot of government shutdown, and that just delays someone being reimbursed for their moving expenses. So unfortunately, it's sad that it happens. And I personally, because I love the military so much, I wish our lawmakers could do something to prevent that from happening. But I do think that we have to plan ahead. And, you know, that can involve, maybe you don't have any savings right now, but you look at your budget and you can say, hey, how can we cut back and save so that we can have this in the future? And a lot of military spouses, too, will do different little odd jobs here and there. Things they make, things they sell, you know, so they can have a little bit of extra income. And it does help you also to just kind of have something of your own. I taught fitness classes. That's not all what my degree is in. I don't even think I'm very athletic, but I taught fitness classes because that's something I like to do. And it gave me a little extra cash and a little something that was quote unquote my own, you know? And that just usually meant I taught 3 or 4 fitness classes a week. But in general, it is a sacrifice. And you're often going to be struggling. Now, you know, the longer you work in the military, the better you get compensated. And I think one of the things that we did is that we saved my income, you know, and didn't learn to live off the 2 incomes or even my fitness income. You know, that was just fun money. But yeah, do what you can to save and to look at where can you cut costs so that you will have that buffer, you know. And it's hard, right? You might have to say, like, we're not going to have cable for a few months, or we're going to lower our phone plan, or we're not going to have these extra expenses. You know, maybe we're going to look at what are all the sports we have the kids involved in. But, you know, you really just have to look at every expenditure and say, hey, is this necessary? And can we get that 3-month buffer of our pay so that we're not always on the edge of our seat kind of freaking out when these things are going to happen? You know, also, I know I definitely felt this way. Like I had to sacrifice and not have income for a long time to stay home with our kids because of my husband's deployment schedules. But, you know, here I'm at the other side of that, and it's a season. And I feel like I have a lot of my life left that I can work and earn income, you know, and pursue things now that, you know, I never had any idea I was going to write a book, which, by the way, you don't usually make money writing a book. You spend money.
True.
So I'm not making money doing that, but at least I'm pursuing things that the Lord has on my life and things that are, you know, just for me that aren't associated with, you know, what my husband does in uniform. So there are times where we have to put some of our dreams on hold, but I'm here to tell you that that time will come when you can pursue the things. And my husband, when I was writing the book and I was also in seminary, he took up cleaning our house. He is really good at cleaning my house. And, you know, I had always done that. But we just kind of switched places, and it was really a blessing. My kids used to keep my house clean, and I always had to inspect what I expected, you know, as far as the level of cleanliness. I don't have to do that with my husband. The military trained him really well to do a job well the first time.
Yay.
Oh, that's good.
I like that.
Well, Beth, before we close, for the wife listening today that she might be tired and overwhelmed and ready to quit, what's one thing that you want her to hold on from this conversation?
Yeah, one of the stories from Genesis 12:22 is the story of Hagar. And Hagar was a maidservant, so a slave, not like our Civil War slave. She was a servant. She was made to work. And there's an account where, I'm not going to go into all the details, but she was marginalized. Things were forced on her that she definitely probably didn't want. And then she flees because she is not being respected by Sarah, and she flees, and the Lord appears to her and tells her he sees her. He sees her struggling. He sees her suffering, and he cares. And Hagar calls God El Roy, the God who sees.
Yes.
And so to that military spouse out there that is lonely, you feel like you're suffering, you feel like no one cares, El Roy, the God who sees, he sees you. He
Yes.
cares. He wants to come to you in your time of need. And so I would encourage you, I believe it's Genesis 16, but it might be 18 is where that account is. Everyone else had rejected Hagar, and God appears to her. It says the angel of the Lord appeared to her. And some scholars believe the angel of the Lord there is a pre-manifestation of Jesus, the Messiah. And a woman that was rejected, that was marginalized, that felt that no one seed her, the angel of the Lord, which I believe is God himself, appeared to her and told her he cared. And I believe the same holds true for you. God desperately cares. And he wants to minister to you in your time of need. And just open your eyes and see that he's right there.
Yes. And he does see all of us.
He absolutely does.
Yes. We must believe that.
This has been an awesome conversation.
I have truly enjoyed again.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed you too. And I love that we got to talk about our shared military experience.
Yes. Beth, we want to thank you for joining us today and for reminding us that peace doesn't come from knowing what's next.
Amen.
It comes from knowing who holds it.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Our next. Yes.
We want to thank you for your book, Another Move God, that
Yes.
I understand now where the title definitely comes from.
Exactly. It's like you saying,
Again.
not again,
Amen.
again.
And we are going to have all your information in the
Yes.
notes. And if I'm not mistaken, BethRunkle.com
Yes, very good.
is your website.
Yes, absolutely.
I know they can reach you there. And I know you have a fantastic blog with a lot of information. I don't know what's the update there, but I know from last year that she has awesome ideas for the holidays. So
Yes.
you should check that out.
Yes.
And all the other information, and get her book, especially if you are a military spouse or a military spouse. This could be the perfect holiday gift.
Yeah, and I saw Amazon put it on sale. So it's like under $10 right now.
Okay.
Yay.
See? So go run and check it out and get it as a holiday present for any military spouse that you know.
Stocking stuff.
Stuff it. Yeah, that's a
Hey,
great.
yeah, it's small. It'll fit in the stocking.
Look at
Awesome.
that. There you go.
You thought of everything.
Everything.
I love it.
Yes, and especially with these hard times, I know all of them need a little bit of hope from somebody who's been there, and in a way still there, but somebody who's been there in the trenches, especially if you're young and starting married life in the middle of the military.
Yeah.
That has to be quite the interesting journey.
Yes. And to all of our listeners, whether you're part of a military family or just in a season of change, remember God's presence goes with you wherever you go and wherever your next will be. I will be there with you.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for returning to Thrive by the Rising Muse. Don't forget to follow us on all platforms. We are at the Rising Muse on all of them. Help us reach our next big goal of 1,000 followers on YouTube. Every follow, every comment, and share helps our message of faith and mental wellness reach more people.
And we do appreciate you tuning in.
Absolutely.
Yes. If you're experiencing a mental health crisis, dial 988. If you know someone, a loved one, or a friend experiencing a mental health crisis, dial 911 or take them to the nearest emergency room. If you think you're in a domestic violence relationship and you need help, call 800-799-7233 or text 887-888. Please make sure you're in a safe place when you're reaching out for help.
Until next time, keep growing, keep thriving, and keep trusting that even in the move, God's already there. And don't forget to thrive. Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye.